Hi everyone. Well, I thought I'd try a little something different today. You guys know that I like the motorcycle, and you also know that I like history a lot, and whenever I can, I try to combine the two together. A lot of times when I'm out on my motorcycle, I don't just go from point A to point B. I kind of like to meander around a little bit. And a lot of times I come across things that are like, well, a little unusual, and rather than just kind of ignoring it, I try to figure out what is going on. So I thought I would kind of take you around today and maybe some other days too on my motorcycle and show you some of these things around Sturgeon Bay that make this kind of an interesting town. There's things scattered all over the place. Like for instance, I live in a very new, very nondescript subdivision here on the
Well,
west side
maybe
of
not
town.
that new.
And you wouldn't think there'd be anything of any historical importance in this area whatsoever. But I'm going to show you within like 2 minutes of my, not even 2 minutes, like within 1 minute of my house, there's something pretty cool. So let's go ahead and check it out. All right, please excuse the quality. It's gonna be a little grainy. You're on a mount behind my windshield. That's what's giving it that weird kind of blurry effect there. It's heat coming up from my engine and getting behind my windshield. It's keeping me nice and warm on this kind of cool day, but I know it's making the video a little bit strange. There's really nothing I can do about it, so bear with me, please. Try not to make anybody sick. I know it probably looks like I'm going like a bat out of hell through my neighborhood. I'm not. I'm going below the speed limit. It just looks really fast out here. I'm a nice guy. Get a little bumpy there too, but that just keeps it authentic. This Sturgeon Bay after all. So here we have not even been out for a minute and 30 seconds and already came across something that's pretty neat. And these things are scattered all through Sturgeon Bay, if you know what I'm talking about. And by what I mean by these things, I mean interesting historical things. Well, you can see right here, and some of you may have seen this, we're at this place, we're on Tacoma Beach Road, actually at the corner of South Oxford and Tacoma Beach Road. And right here's a sign, and it says Southside Cemetery, lest we forget, 1869. Well, if you look around, this thing seems to be missing the one basic thing that most cemeteries, well, all cemeteries have, and that's gravestones, graves. That's what cemeteries are about. It looks like it's just a big, empty grass yard with a bunch of big trees around it. Well, it is a cemetery. This place has got a weird story. As you can see, 1869 or thereabouts. This was started as a private ceremony, private cemetery, which was then transformed into a township cemetery back before this was part of Sturgeon Bay. And then later on, this little section of town, or this little section of land, was absorbed into the city of Sturgeon Bay. The problem was, by the time it was absorbed into Sturgeon Bay, this cemetery had become completely overgrown with grass and weeds and trees and bushes and rambles, and nobody even, very few people even knew that there was a cemetery here. They just kind of assumed that it was just a bunch of what it looked like, and that was a bunch of weeds. And I've heard two different stories, either in the late 1940s or in the early 1950s, the city decided to build this road right over here, which is now Tacoma Beach Road. This road didn't exist. As they were building the road, they were coming through this area with bulldozers and excavators and things like that. Well, because they didn't know what cemetery was here, they just started ripping stuff up. It wasn't their fault. It wasn't intended. It was just the way it is. And so what ended up happening is a lot of the gravestones, well, seemingly all of the gravestones, those that were still standing, and quite a few might have been deteriorated. Some of the original ones might have been wood in the first place, but the gravestones were all tore up. So in this cemetery here, where you don't visibly see any stones, there are a lot of people buried here. Who knows how many, but probably quite a few. Now, there are a few places here at the cemetery where people have guesstimated, I guess you could say, where there might be some bodies. Or, you know, in some places there's, and I know it's kind of hard for you to see, the ground is a little raised right there, so who knows, there might be something down there. But then there's a few places, like over by this tree, where somebody, and I don't know who, along the line put these little metal white crosses. Perhaps somebody's buried in this close vicinity. Or if I walk over here, there's another one, and there's some more in those bushes, or I'm sorry, in those weeds over there. And then if we go over here into the edge of the woods here, there's actually the remnants of an actual old gravestone here. You can't read it. From what I can see, it looks like the person was born in 1867, and then their death is a little hard to figure out. It looks like maybe it's hard to even tell. I hate to even guess what it was. It's got a name down there, but it's really hard to read. I don't know if that stone is placed here later, or if there's a grave down there. There are a couple of recognizable, or I guess you could say marked gravestones in the cemetery. These were obviously, I'll take you up here, these were obviously placed here years after the cemetery was accidentally destroyed. They all belong to veterans. I'm going to assume some local veterans group, maybe the VFW or the American Legion or something, came along and put these stones here. I'll take you up here. Like I said, I doubt very much that these three gentlemen are buried at this particular point. They're probably down there amongst the masses, but these stones have been put up here. I'm assuming. Like I said, I don't really know. It's just one of those things. Like, for instance, right here you can see we have a Civil War veteran, Philip Riley, born in 1826, died in 1903. Not sorry, 1902. Over here, Spanish-American War veteran, died in 1932. So he was buried here approximately 20 years before this cemetery was accidentally destroyed. And then right here, this is an actual old gravestone. So I don't know if this survived or what, if it was moved up here. I know it's impossible for you guys to see. It's hard for me to see it being here in person. But this is actually a Civil War veteran. Well, here's the reason I brought you up here. In addition to the fact that this is just one of those kind of unusual little things, a cemetery with, well, 3 gravestones in it, is the fact that there is somebody or some people in this cemetery who are actually, well, they're pretty big names historically, if you know who the people are. George Washington. George Washington married a woman named Martha Custis. Martha Custis became Martha Custis Washington. Well, Martha Custis had been married before she married George Washington. Her first husband was a guy by the name of Custis. His last name was Custis. That's why her name was Martha Custis Washington. He died. Oftentimes in colonial America, particularly in the South, women tended to outlive men. It was not unusual law for a lot of women to have 2, maybe 3 husbands in their lifetime. So it's just one of the sad realities of living in colonial America, particularly the South, malaria and things like that at the time. Well, when the man died, the wife would inherit the property. Now, when the woman got remarried, then the property became the property of her new husband. Anyway, included in the property of Martha Custis when she married George Washington and moved to Monticello,
Mount Vernon, duh.
A lot of you were at in 8th grade, was her slaves. Oftentimes, almost all the times, slaves took on the last names of their masters. So that means Martha Custis's slaves, their last name would have been Custis. Well, where's this all going? What does this have to do with Sturgeon Bay? Well, here it is. in this graveyard someplace, who knows where, is at least 6 people with the last name Custis, a mother, and then at least 5 children. Who are these people? These people were the wife and children of a man named Peter Custis. Peter Custis appeared in Sturgeon Bay in the late 1800s, and he lived here for a long time. He's actually buried out at the Bayview Cemetery, which is out on Bayshore Drive. Anyways, Peter Custis, when he arrived in Sturgeon Bay, he told people, and you just have to take him for his truth here. Nobody really knows if any of this is true, but Peter Custis not only claimed to be a former slave, but he claimed, because of his last name, he claimed that he was the ancestor of the slaves that belonged to George Washington and Martha Custis. So in other words, what I'm saying here is, even though he himself is not buried in this cemetery, the wife and at least 5 children of a man who claims to be a direct descendant of one of the slaves of George Washington, the father of our country, is buried right here in Sturgeon Bay, Wisconsin. It's kind of an unusual little thing. Once again, nobody really knows if it's true. Nobody knows how close Peter Custis might have been to the actual slaves that would have belonged to George Washington and Martha Custis. Obviously, he would have been removed by several generations. He told everybody that he came from Virginia. I don't know.
Once again, Mount Vernon, not Monticello.
I don't know if he ever set eyes on, well, those of you who are in Washington, D.C. in the 8th grade, who went to Arlington Cemetery, I don't know if you remember or not, but when you were at John Kennedy's grave, that's the one with the eternal flame, behind that flame was a big hill, and on top of that hill was a big house. That house belonged to Robert E. Lee, the commanding general of the Confederate Army during the Civil War. Robert E. Lee was married to Martha Custis's great-granddaughter, so she was a Custis as well. So he might have laid eyes on that. Who knows? Who knows the real story? But I guess the long short of why I brought you here is there is a possibility, and it is just a possibility, that people that, especially the children of Peter Custis, but also the wife, people that had a relation with a man who was a rather prominent citizen of Sturgeon Bay at the time, which was unusual to have an African American as a prominent citizen of Sturgeon Bay. But not only were they related to this prominent citizen very well could have been the descendant of a slave that once upon a time belonged to, well, the father of our country, George Washington. I always thought that was kind of interesting. Here we are, we're a long ways away from Washington, D.C. We're a long ways away from where the original 13 colonies are. We're a long ways away from the South. We're up here in Door County in northeast Wisconsin, but there's our little connection right there with some very early days in our country. All right. Hope you found that interesting.
And for the 3rd time, obviously, George Washington's home was Mount Vernon, not Monticello. Monticello was Thomas Jefferson's home. I just got done reading a book about Thomas Jefferson. I guess I have Monticello on the brain. Sorry about that.